Well, if it isn't another tech showdown that promises to be more exciting than watching paint dry, today, we're diving into the riveting world of custom performance metrics. Because who doesn't love a good old-fashioned numbers game, right? MTQ. Apple 4 Pro Performance Ryzen AI MAX Review sounds like a title so long it could give a toad a cramp just trying to read it. I can already hear the tech enthusiasts squealing with delight. But let's be real, half of them wouldn't know a good processor if it bit them. So grab your snacks or don't, who cares, just make sure to stick around and watch me dissect this tech circus. And hey, if you enjoy my delightful grumbling and occasional begrudging approval, don't forget to subscribe and like, in case you want to hear more of my croaky wisdom. Let's get this over with.
This is Cyberpunk running at almost 70 frames per second at 1200p, and this is me editing a 20-minute review in Resolve, and it took less than 10 minutes to export.
Well, color me impressed. Less than 10 minutes to export a 20-minute review, that's faster than a toad hopping away from a predator. But let's not get too excited, it's just a software doing its job. If only my bog could clear out that quickly after a rainstorm. Still, I'll begrudgingly admit that's a solid performance.
I'm also running DeepSeek R1 within LM Studio, and it's pretty fast to compute locally. All of this done in a PC that's just 0.6 inches thin and only weighs around 3.5 pounds, which is almost the same size as a 13-inch iPad Pro. Yeah, this tiny machine packs some serious power. All of this is possible thanks to the new Ryzen AI MAX processors that use a single chip with up to 32 threads on the CPU side and a massive GPU.
The magic of 32 threads sounds like a party I'd rather avoid, but I'll give credit where it's due. That's some serious multitasking power. It's like having a bunch of toads in my bog, each doing their own thing without croaking over each other. Just hope it doesn't overheat and turn into a swampy mess.
With that combination, AMD is hoping that they have a solution that can beat Apple's new M4 chips in creative workloads, while also delivering a good option for AI development and gamers as well. And although it was announced this year at CES, we're finally now allowed to actually talk about how this thing performs in all of those areas. I think there are tons of different applications where we could see the Ryzen AI MAX series, or what's codenamed Strix Halo. So from ultra small form factor PCs to something like the ROG Flow Z13. The options are limitless, since it gives companies the ability to maximize CPU and, more importantly, graphics power without needing a discrete GPU. And a bit about the Flow Z13, because we have two of them over here, one with the Ryzen AI MAX 395 and the other with the 390. Both have 32 gigabytes of memory, which is a bit unfortunate since this platform can technically be configured with up to 120 gigabytes of LPDDR5X shared between the CPU and the GPU. But I would expect 120 gigabyte devices targeted towards AI devs rather than gamers like this thing does. Also, based on our testing, ASUS has configured it to run up to 70 watts, but that just scratches the surface of what Strix Halo can achieve, since AMD rates it to run anywhere between 45 watts to 125 watts. I mean, of course, we'd never see those high power specs in a tablet as small as the Z13 over here because of cooling limitations, but this also points towards the AI MAX series.
The classic cooling limitations excuse, like saying my bog is too small for a proper toad party. It's true though. You can't expect a tiny tablet to handle the heat of a full-blown gaming rig, but it does raise an interesting point about the AI MAX series. If they can find a way to balance power and cooling, we might just see some real innovation. Until then, I guess we're stuck with our underwhelming little devices.
AI MAX series being potentially a lot more powerful than you're about to see. And speaking of seeing, let's get into the benchmarks with a quick overview of the devices we're using. So the Z13 is a pretty unique form factor. It isn't a tablet, it isn't a laptop, it's a bit of both. There's just a lot going on for it. So we're putting these chips against the older Z13 and a couple of thin and light gaming laptops. All of them have discrete GPUs, and finally there's also the MacBook Pro with the M4 Pro chip. And those 32 and 24 threads of the AI MAX series gives them a serious edge over other Windows laptops. And I should also mention that R23 runs through emulation on the MacBook, so we aren't seeing its true potential. Moving on to R24, and here the MacBook jumps out to a lead, but it's a lot smaller than you might have expected. There's something else going on over here too. Even though the AI MAX 390 has the same number of processing threads as the HX 370 and is running at 10 watts lower, it's actually faster. Now that could be because the Ryzen AI series mixes the Zen 5C core.
Well, look at that. The Ryzen AI MAX 390 pulling ahead, despite being 10 lower. It's like the underdog toad outpacing the flashy frog in a race. This could mean AMD's really onto something with their architecture. If they can keep this up, they might just give the big players a run for their money. But let's not get too carried away. We've seen plenty of hype before.
5C cores for efficiency, whereas the Max processors only use those big boy Zen 5 cores. Meanwhile, single-threaded operation has never really been the highlight of any Ryzen architecture, and while the Zen 5 did make some improvements, it still lags behind. The 395 and 390 don't improve on that in any way, and there is a statistical tie with the HX 370, which makes sense given those clock speeds we just talked about. As for real-world benchmarks, well, AMD promised an Apple M4 killer, and that's what the Max Plus 395 does. But we also have to remember, the Flow Z13 is chugging back about 20 watts more than the MacBook Pro here. Basically, the 395 and 390 end up bracketing the M4 Pro chip while also being faster than the other processors here. There's also an interesting side story developing that shows just how much better the Z13 is than the Intel-based one from just 2 years ago. I mean, it's on another planet in terms of multi-core performance.
Now we're talking. The Z13 leaving that Intel-based model in the dust is like watching a toad leap over a puddle while a snail struggles to cross the road. Multi-core performance is where it's at, and it's nice to see some real progress. If AMD can keep this momentum, they might just redefine the game. But let's not forget, it's all about practical use. Benchmarks are one thing, but real-world performance is what counts.
Multi-core performance. Moving on to more creator-focused workloads, and this is one area where the optimizations between Apple's hardware and operating systems start really flexing. Native apps are just so fast on the M4 series, and it's just hard to recommend anything else. And yet, the Ryzen AI MAX series are by far the fastest Windows mobile processors we've ever tested here. And that proves that more than Intel or Qualcomm, it's AMD that has a chance to catch up with and beat what Apple's offering. Now, you might think that we gave the AI MAX chips an unfair advantage by running them at a higher wattage than the M4 Pro in the last test. Basically, we wanted to see how all these systems would perform at their maximum performance level. But what happens when we align the 395 and 390 with the M4 Pro while they are running at around 50 watts? Well, the AI MAX Plus 395 goes from beating the M4 Pro in multi-threaded apps like Blender, Houdini, and
Now we're getting to the juicy stuff. The Ryzen AI MAX 395 taking the lead in multi-threaded apps like Blender and Houdini is impressive. It's like watching a toad leap over a log while the competition is still figuring out how to hop. If AMD can keep this momentum, they might just give Apple a real run for their money. But let's see how it holds up in the long run. Benchmarks are one thing, but real-world usage is where the rubber meets the road.
Houdini, and Handbrake to very narrowly losing to it. Meanwhile, in apps like Photoshop, Resolve, and Lightroom, the M4 Pro pulls even further ahead, with the only exception being Premiere. Running the 390 at 50 watts also takes some wind out of its sails, but again, from an apples-to-apples perspective, AMD might not quite have caught up to Apple Silicon yet, especially in areas where macOS optimizations come into play. But the gap is getting narrower than it's ever been. In the past, Windows-based portables needed ultra power-hungry CPUs and discrete GPUs to reach this kind of performance. But here we are, with a single chip that can pull something like this off. Now, we can't forget that one of the main disadvantages of many Windows-based laptops is how their performance literally falls off a cliff when they're asked to do anything other than light tasks when they're running on battery. So starting with a full core workload in Handbrake, and some interesting things happen. First of all, the MacBook actually gets faster, while CPUs based on older designs like the 8945HS and the 13900H see their performance tanked. Meanwhile,
Now this is getting interesting. The MacBook speeding up while older cus tank. That's like watching a toad effortlessly glide over a log while the competition struggles to hop. It really highlights how crucial power management is if AMD can crack that code. They might just turn the tables, but for now, it's clear that battery performance is still a sticking point for many Windows machines.
Meanwhile, the Zen 5-based AI and AI MAX CPUs still need longer to complete the test, but the impact of running on battery isn't anywhere near as drastic. Meanwhile, in Cinebench, every processor sees its performance fall off a cliff, except the HX370 and the M4 Pro. Now, this could be due to the fact that Cinebench is a heavier workload than Handbrake. And the Ryzen AI MAX series cuts its power pretty drastically here, whereas some others just don't. In a lighter threaded app like Photoshop, performance retention is pretty good right across the board, with the only real exception to that being the Intel processor. That thing just gets destroyed. So what we have over here is a multi-threaded powerhouse in an ultra mobile tablet style form factor. And while AMD has had 16-core 32-thread processors in high-end laptops for about 2 years now, what makes this one different is its integrated GPU.
At the integrated GPU twist, that's the game changer here. It's like finding out your favorite toad can not only jump but also swim like a champ. Having a solid GPU integrated means you can pack a punch without needing a bulky setup. If AMD can nail this balance, they might just redefine what we expect from ultra-mobile devices. Let's see if they can keep this momentum going.
GPU. Simply put, it's huge, and to put its size into perspective, the current integrated graphics crown was held by the Radeon 890M inside the HX370. It uses the RDNA 3.5 architecture with 16 compute units running at up to 2.9 GHz. The AI MAX series, on the other hand, uses the same architecture and runs around the same speed, but the Radeon 8060S in the AI MAX Plus 395 has 40 compute units, while the 8050S has 32. Now, on paper, at least, that puts it somewhere between the performance of an AMD RX 7600M XT and 7800M discrete laptop GPU. And for creators, that means a huge amount of potential on tap. But there was also a bit of a problem with the way ASUS set up both the Flow Z13s we got. You see, one of the AI Max's benefits, I guess biggest benefits, is that it can dynamically partition up to 3/4 of its system memory for the GPU. That means in a 32GB system like the ones that we have over here.
Now we're getting to the nitty-gritty. The ability to dynamically allocate up to 3/4 of the system memory for the GPU is a game changer. It's like giving a toad a whole pond to swim in instead of just a puddle. This flexibility could really enhance performance for creators, especially in demanding tasks. If ASUS can optimize the setup properly, we might see some serious power in those Flow Z-trends. Let's hope they don't drop the ball on this one.
Over here, you could reserve 24 gigabytes for graphics workloads or AI processing, while the 128GB versions get up to an insane 96 gigabytes. Now, there are two ways to go about this. One of them is to let AMD's auto detection do its job, since it can technically self-detect the optimal amount of memory for a job. The other option is to manually set GPU memory in the BIOS or in Adrenaline's variable graphics memory settings. The problem is that for some ridiculous reason, ASUS isn't shipping the Z13 set to auto. Actually, out of the box, this thing is set to run with just 4 gigabytes of VRAM.
Seriously, setting it to just 4 GB of VRAM out of the box is like giving a toad a thimble of water in a drought. That's a huge oversight. If ASUS wants to showcase the power of the AI MAX series, they need to let it breathe. This kind of restriction could really hinder performance. Especially for creators who need every ounce of power, they better fix that in future models, or they'll be leaving a lot of potential on the table.
And its effect on performance is just insane. In Resolve, we see a huge benefit from just moving from ASUS's out-of-the-box setting to AMD's Auto, which dedicates 8 gigabytes to this project. However, at 16 gigabytes and 24 gigabytes, the CPU starts getting starved for resources and rendering times start going upwards. Premiere saw the same thing with 4 gigabytes, just destroying system performance, but this time, 16 gigabytes for both the CPU and GPU seems to be the sweet spot. Gaming, on the other hand, also showed that the GPU seems to do best with 8 gigabytes of dedicated memory, and going beyond that ended up with basically no benefit. As a matter of fact, there were a few games like Red Dead Redemption that either refused to run or saw frame rate regressions. Meanwhile, manually setting 8 gigabytes seemed to do better than letting AMD software set to auto mode. Now, we're guessing this is due to immature drivers, so things are bound to improve in the future, but for comparison purposes, we're manually setting our systems, or both of our systems, to set aside 8 gigabytes for the integrated Radeon 8000S GPUs. So in areas where GPU acceleration gets factored into the equation, like in Handbrake, the AI MAX series can be very fast. easily beating systems with an RTX 4060, 4070, and
Now we're talking. The AI Max series outpacing systems with RTX 4060 and 4070 and Handbrake is no small feat. It's like watching a toad leap over a whole pack of frogs. This shows that AMD is really making strides in performance, especially in GPU-accelerated tasks. If they can keep this up, they might just shake up the whole market. But let's see how it holds up in real-world scenarios beyond just benchmarks.
4070 and even Apple's M4 Pro in Handbrake. And yet, it can't pull off miracles every single time, especially against systems with discrete GPUs. I mean, it puts in a good showing Resolve with results that are close to what an HX 370 can get when it's paired with an RTX 4060 laptop GPU, but that can't compete with the Apple alternatives, nor with something like an RTX 4070. That's hammered home in Premiere Pro against systems with discrete GPUs. But even the M4 Pro struggles here. So in my books, what AMD accomplished here with integrated graphics is almost unbelievably impressive. They've essentially designed a single chip CPU and graphics solution that can almost match an RTX 4060. That's impressive.
Now that's a bold claim. Matching an RTX 4060 with a single chip solution is no small feat. It's like a toad taking on a bullfrog in a jumping contest and actually holding its own. If AMD can keep pushing these boundaries, they might just redefine what we expect from integrated graphics. But let's not forget, real-world performance is what truly matters. If they can deliver on that, they'll have a serious winner on their hands.
That's impressive. Now, the gaming results back this up too, with the AI Max 390 coming close to matching, and in some cases even narrowly beating the HX 370 RTX 4060 systems in many games. Meanwhile, the 395 really puts on an impressive show by actually managing to beat a laptop that's sporting an RTX 4070 running at 70 watts. It's really hard to describe how crazy this thing is.
Now that's a jaw-dropper. The Ryzen AI MAX 395 beating a laptop with an RTX 4070 at 70 was nothing short of impressive. It's like watching a scrappy toad outshove a heavyweight champion. This really shows the potential of AMD's integrated graphics. If they can keep this momentum, they might just change the game for mobile gaming. But let's see how it holds up across a wider range of titles before we start throwing confetti.
This thing is. That discrete card in the laptop is running at 70 watts, which is actually as much as the same amount of power as the entire AI Max chip that can consume on these systems, CPU and GPU combined. Even the AI Max 390 puts down some incredible numbers in that respect, even at a native 1600p resolution. Now, both systems are also able to outperform the last Intel-based Z13 with its 50-watt RTX 4060 by a pretty wide margin in most situations. You'll probably also notice that the only device that we don't have here is the MacBook Pro, and that's for two reasons. First of all, most games here just don't natively run on Apple hardware, though some do, and also we just don't have a reliable way to capture frame rates in macOS, at least not yet, but we're working on it. Now, there's obviously some areas where AMD needs to massage their drivers a bit, or there's some CPU limitations going on behind the scenes. CS2 is proof of that because it looks like NVIDIA's GPUs might have some optimizations that are lacking in RDNA 3, but hopefully as time goes on, the Radeon team can get things rolling. Okay, so that establishes the Ryzen AI 9 Max series as something special on the GPU performance side. But there is one more stop, and that's AI workloads, something a lot of systems using these chips will be targeting. I mean, look, AMD has slapped AI into these products, so we have to talk about it. And just a quick note, not one of these tools would run on AMD's integrated XDNA-based NPUs, so we're solely focusing on how well these workloads are accelerated through the graphics subsystem. One of the main issues we have is that most programs don't recognize the GPU right now because it's so new, so we expect any results you see to improve in the future, especially as AMD's ROCm gets rolled out broadly.
Well. The fact that programs don't even recognize the GPU yet is a bit concerning, but it's also a sign of how new this tech is. It's like a toad trying to find its place in a new pond. If AMD can get their ROCm out there and improve compatibility, we might see some real advancements in AI workloads. It's all about potential right now, but let's hope they can deliver on it.
out broadly. I should also point out that we set the Ryzen AI MAX systems to reserve 24 gigabytes of memory for the GPU in these tests. So let's start off with an 8B and 14B models running through the Backyard AI interface. Since the 8B model is relatively light and easily runs on all the systems with the discrete NVIDIA GPUs taking the lead, the M4 Pro puts in a pretty good showing too, even though that this program isn't optimized for this app. Meanwhile, the AI MAX series does pretty good here as well by offering performance that's almost as good as the 70-watt 4070 and 4060, while also being able to beat the power-starved RTX 4060 in the 2023 Flow Z13. But when you hit these systems with a larger 14B model that doesn't fit completely within the smaller memory footprint of the discrete GPUs, and the ability to set aside 24 gigabytes on the AI MAX really comes in clutch. They can even edge out the M4 Pro. In LM Studio, we've decided to use DeepSeek R1 with 8B and 14B models.
Now we're getting into the meat of it. The AI MAX series edging out the War Pro is a significant win. It shows that AMD is really making strides in AI workloads. If they can keep this momentum, they might just carve out a solid niche in the market. And using 24 deep for those larger models, smart move. It's like giving a toad a whole pond instead of a puddle to thrive in. Let's see how this translates into real-world applications moving forward.
B models. Due to AMD's optimizations, they're a lot more competitive against the RTX 4070 and 4060 in the smaller model, and just walk away with things at 14B. But nothing, and I mean nothing, can touch Apple here, since they're seeing the benefits of a program running through their native MLX AI framework. Just to give you an idea, you'd need to be running a desktop RTX 4070 to beat these numbers. Unfortunately, synthetic AI tests like UL Procyon have a long list of issues when it comes to supporting and optimizing for new architectures, and we see that here. Both the AI MAX chips get relatively good numbers in Stable Diffusion 1.5, but they underperform when running Stable Diffusion XL. And Apple, well, unfortunately, UL still hasn't rolled out proper support for the M4 series chips. The interface benchmark doesn't help matters either, since AMD GPUs need to run through Windows ML here rather than under their own native framework. So their numbers are all messed up, and no, there isn't support for Apple Silicon here either. Honestly, until UL can turn...
Well, that's a real kicker. If the benchmarks are all messed up because of compatibility issues, it's hard to get a clear picture of performance. It's like trying to judge a toad's leap when it's stuck in a bog. Until UL sorts out their support for these new architectures, we're left with incomplete data. It's frustrating, especially when you know there's potential waiting to be unleashed. Let's hope they get their act together soon.
Turn things around somehow as we continue to build out more AI testing in the future. Expect us to phase out this benchmark entirely. So the last thing that I want to cover here is battery life, and I'll be perfectly honest, it's a bit difficult to evaluate how efficient AMD's AI MAX is on battery. That's because the only device we have is the Z13, a quasi-tablet with a relatively small 70 watt-hour battery. So hopefully we get a bit better perspective as some actual laptops roll out with it. And even with the smaller battery, you know what? I was expecting a bit more from the Max series, especially when you consider that other than the 2023 version, it has the smallest screen here. I mean, sure, 9 hours is good, but it should be a lot better. Playing back local video doesn't make it look any better either, but at least it's far, far better than the previous version, which only came with a 56 watt-hour battery. And actually, capacity plays a big role here since it's wide.
Well, the battery performance comparison really puts things into perspective. The Apple 4 Pro absolutely crushing it at over 25 hours is impressive, while the Ryzen AI MAX series still has some catching up to do. 9 hours isn't terrible. But it's clear that AMD needs to optimize their battery efficiency further. If they can improve on that front, they might just make these devices more appealing for everyday use. But for now, it looks like Apple is still leading the charge.
The MacBook does so well. It has a massive 99.6 watt-hour battery that's almost 50% bigger than anything else here. Personally though, I'm hoping that AMD can tweak things a bit, because there's no way APUs like the Max series should be getting beaten in battery life testing by two systems with discrete GPUs like the Zephyrus G14 and the TUF A14. The interesting thing is when you hit these two CPUs with a heavier workload while on battery, they surge to the front and get the best battery life. And 90 minutes on battery isn't a lot, but at least it'll let you get a project finished and rendered out in a pinch. And that MacBook, I mean, it does gobble up its 99.6 watt hours, and I guess that's a sacrifice Apple's chosen to make in order to maintain the M4 Pro's performance when it's not plugged in. So what AMD has done here is something very special. They've crammed one of the most powerful laptop CPUs and a really good GPU into a single chip, and the end result is so beautiful.
Now we're talking. Cramming a powerful CPU and GPU into a single chip is no small feat. It's like fitting a whole toad family into a tiny pond and still having room to swim. If AMD can deliver on this promise, they might just redefine what we expect from laptops. The potential here is massive, and it's exciting to see how this could change the landscape. Let's hope they keep pushing the envelope.
Even when running at just 70 watts, the Ryzen AI MAX Plus 395 is able to match and in many cases beat a 70-watt RTX 4060 laptop GPU in gaming, while also getting very good results in AI workloads. And because of its dynamic memory interface, these chips can run AI models that would normally choke many discrete graphics cards. Are there still some areas that need ironing out? Absolutely. AMD obviously needs a few more optimizations for battery life, and they need to put their foot down and stop partners like ASUS from shipping these devices with just 4 gigabytes dedicated to the GPU. That's like putting $50 tires on a high-end sports car. And while they don't ultimately beat the M4 Pro, especially not when running at identical power levels, overall, the 390 and 395 are the closest any single processor has come to catching up with Apple.
Now that's a bold statement. The 390 and 395 being the closest to catching up with Apple is a significant milestone for AMD. It's like watching a determined toad finally leap over the log that's been blocking its path. If they can keep refining their technology, we might see a real shift in the market dynamics. It's exciting to think about what the future holds if they can keep this momentum going.
Up with Apple. And for that, we need to give AMD a ton of credit. And I'm so excited to see these effect on processors in laptops, especially gaming handhelds in the future. Now, if I zoom out and take a look at the Flow Z13, it's a tablet that can also transform into a laptop. It's not for gamers, it's not for creators. So the question is, who is it really for? Honestly, I think ASUS made it more to show off their engineering. I mean, hey, they were like, look at what we can do, rather than to fill in a real market demand. It's the kind of product that looks great for a YouTube video like this one, but it makes less sense when you break down the use case. If I wanted a gaming laptop, I'd just get a gaming laptop. If I needed a laptop for editing purposes, I would get something that has more ports and the screen real estate, because as fast as this thing is, editing in a small 13-inch display was a pain.
The classic case of style over substance. A 13-inch display for editing is like trying to catch flies with a toothpick, just not practical. Sure, it's fast, but if you're squinting at a tiny screen, what's the point? If ASUS really wants to cater to creators, they need to rethink the design. Bigger screens and more ports are essential for real work. Otherwise, it's just a flashy gadget that looks good in a video but doesn't deliver in real-world use.
A pain. You pretty much need an external monitor to get enough screen real estate. So let's just hope to see these chips rolled out into more products this year. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.
Well, that was a ride I didn't ask for but somehow endured, traversing the thrilling and oh-so-exciting world of CUS and their performance metrics. If you thought watching grass grow was about as riveting as this video review from Hardware Canucks, you'd be spot on. Let's recap, shall we? We started with yet another overly long title that practically made my scaly eyes glaze over. After struggling through a barrage of benchmark numbers, it turned out that I was regrettably impressed. If you can export a 20-minute review in under 10 minutes, that's a speed I wish my legs could manage when escaping a muddy bog. The Ryzen AI MAX series is really strutting its stuff, edging out the competition in a dance-off that I didn't know could be this entertaining. And who wouldn't have thought a bunch of tech nerds could turn a conversation about integrated jups into something that made me raise an eyebrow? Albeit begrudgingly. Let's just hope AMD doesn't drop the ball, or we'll all be back to watching snails cross the road. In conclusion, the expected excitement was, unsurprisingly, not met. This tech showdown was more mundane than my daily croaks, but credit where credit is due. There was some solid advancement. If only they'd fix that pesky VRAM limit. Setting it to just 4 GB is like giving me a thimble of water in the hot summer sun. Utterly unacceptable. Now, if you enjoyed my grumpy musings and have the desire to hear more of my croaky wisdom, you know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe. Don't make me beg, or I might croak it out of frustration. Until next time, look out for those flashy gadgets that promise the world but can barely leap over a puddle.